everyone. As you can see, I am in my doula room, but you are back with another episode of VitaminE. And today we will be talking about accountability and self-sabotage. I really want to talk about self-sabotaging yourself. So we might get into the accountability. All of it kind of works together though. So this has been on me like super tough lately. Self-sabotaging yourself. Wow. How many times do we actually self-sabotage ourselves? Literally. Self-sabotaging is when you stop yourself from getting somewhere or getting to something, and then the accountability part is you not taking responsibility for what you did to get here. So, believe it or not, there are a lot of people in this life that self-sabotage. They just self-sabotage. Sometimes we use the excuses of I'm scared or I don't know what's going to happen if I do this. We use fear as a big excuse to self-sabotage ourselves. I do not self-sabotage at all. I used to, very tough, but now I'm in a place where I try to help people and all of this. But sometimes you cannot help people when they self-sabotage themselves. So self-sabotaging can come in the forms of I'm trying to explain it, in forms of something to better your life, but something comes up to where you make it seem like it was impossible for you to make it or do whatever to better your life. Let's just say I was supposed to meet someone regarding my doula business, somebody that would probably be able to name drop me and get me high up there. Well, self-sabotaging would look like, oh, well, I got something else to do, so I'm not gonna be able to go. Or, okay, I know I said I have this, but something else came up, so I'm not gonna be able to do this. That is the time, and I know people are like, well, things come up, yeah, but you have to weigh your options. Is whatever I had to do more important than getting my business off the ground, or is whatever I had to do less important? Because we do not know how to act as important. We don't know how to prioritize things. That comes into play with the self-sabotaging. Sometimes we might just not know, but a lot of times we self-sabotage ourselves because sometimes it's fear. Like, I can make that big excuse because I'm just scared. But I never know what can happen if I'm gonna let fear control my life. Fear is something that controls a lot of people because we're so terrified to go outside of our comfort zone, so terrified to go outside of our box because we don't know what can happen or what's gonna happen. Once we set foot out there, we can literally have confirmation of something and still be terrified to go out there and experience it or do whatever because of fear. And fear plays into self-sabotaging. I really feel like that's the underlying thing of self-sabotaging. But once you realize that you're doing this or you have these characteristics of, something is coming to better your life and you always make an excuse to not do it or not be there or whatever, you have to recognize the pattern. And a lot of times we don't see ourselves unless somebody else calls it out. But when someone else calls it out, that is your time to take accountability and be like, am I doing that? Like, am I doing that for real? And then be like, shoot, I am doing that. I know a lot of times with me, I didn't see things until people called it out. Like, I was just living like, this is how I am, whatever. But when people started calling me out on my stuff and being like, hey, this is what I see with you. I see this, and you're doing this. And yeah, I felt attacked. Got in my little feelings. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe I am doing that a little bit. Maybe there is something I can do to not do this. So once I started doing that, I started to see myself and I started to realize myself. Because this is the thing, especially with my pregnant mothers, the behavior that you have now, that is what you're teaching your child to be. So if you don't know any type of accountability, if you're self-sabotaging, what do you think you're going to teach your child? You're not going to be able to teach your child to go out there and get it because they're going to be like, well, how come you didn't go out there and get it? And every time I say, let's do this or do this, because kids watch you. So they're going to be like, every time I see this happening, you do. Kids going to watch and they're going to put you in your place. So if you're pregnant or you're even trying to start a family, you have to be very conscious of what you're doing, because your children watch literally everything you do. Literally everything you do. So you have to be like, dang, am I living in fear? Because guess what you're teaching your children to do? Live in fear. Because that's the example before them. You are an example for your child. And if you are showing them fear, self-sabotaging, not holding accountability for things, well, guess what? That's what they're gonna be. And then you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, why are you doing that? I learned it from you, Mom. I learned it from you, Dad. When I was younger, my mother always made me be accountable for whatever I did. Literally. And I hated it. But guess what? It taught me a lot of things. If I was acting up at school, she made me write a letter to my teachers apologizing for what I did. And hey, it was just a lot. I had to take accountability. As long as I'm in the house, I'm doing something, you have to own up to it and you have to take accountability, because this is the thing. Excuses are excuses. I don't need excuses, or you don't need to hand people excuses when you're doing this. That is a sign of self-sabotaging yourself, because if somebody calls you out on it, then you're like, well, this, and this. Stop coming up with excuses to excuse you self-sabotaging yourself. Those excuses are fine. They're great. But you're still using them to self-sabotage yourself. Stop it. Stop using excuses to the reasons you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, especially when you've gotten confirmation. Now, if I did that with every little thing, let's just say, I don't know, something big was coming up and I was just like, well, I don't know, because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to be there. I set myself up for failure right there with even that mentality. If we have that mentality and we recognize that we have this mentality, then it's time to change it. No, changing is not easy, but it can be done. It can be done, because change can be done, but we have to work and we have to fight for change. We have to fight for our deliverance from whatever is hindering us and whatever is binding us down. So we have to look, and I want everybody to analyze themselves. Are we self-sabotaging ourselves? Is every time an opportunity comes available for us, are we making excuses to why we can't go, why we can't attend, especially when we have confirmation? Like, what's going on with this? We gotta see, like, what's happening with us. Are we holding ourselves accountable for that? No, because you know what? It's always gonna be somebody else's fault. If I couldn't make it to the grand opening of boop, 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 it's always gonna be somebody else's fault. Never my own. When it's always your fault. Most of the time, unless it's like an emergency or a freak accident of some kind, it's gonna always be your fault. Most of the time. And then we try to put excuses on there to cover that up. But most of the time it's us. So let's analyze ourselves. Let's see what we can do to stop self-sabotaging ourselves, because we talking about our lives hard. It's this. But sometimes we're making it like that. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes it's not life. Sometimes it's us making our own selves go through. It ain't always somebody else. Sometimes it's you. So let's open up our eyes, people, and see what we can do to stop self-sabotaging, how to teach ourselves to have accountability, because we're in the middle of growth. We're in the middle of all types of things that are healing. So there is nothing unless we are fighting for it. So let's try.